Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to be back to make another video and have another discussion and an informative session. I promise today I'm not going to complain about the government and what it's doing or not doing for the American people. I have a lot of that to talk about, but in coming episodes, I will be dealing with that. But today we're going to take a little break. We're going to talk about something kind of important that I've been asked about many times throughout my life in the United States, and that has to do with Islam and what is Islam. And since it is the month of Ramadan now, that it started about a week ago, I thought I would, take the opportunity to talk about the month of Ramadan and a little bit about Islam. Not much, just enough to kind of give you a basic idea of what Islam is about and what the month of Ramadan is all about. So, the month of Ramadan basically was mandated on Muslims to observe, just like, which is the month of fasting, which similar to the mandates that exist for Jews and Christians. It's a similar concept, similar purpose of it. The Ramadan observance happens from basically sunrise to sunset, and you're supposed to refrain from eating and drinking anything, water, food, nothing basically goes into your stomach for that duration. Once the sun sets, basically, then you are allowed to eat until sunrise. So most people, when the sun sets, that's the time when they have the breaking of the fast meal, which is usually a huge feast, and a lot of people gather around the table, and it's a whole event. It's a big social event, not just a religious function. So a lot of people sit around the table and they eat, they socialize. A lot of the family feuds seem to go away during Ramadan. Families get together again, forget about their feuds and disagreements, and they kind of improve their relations. During the month of Ramadan, you're supposed to be, kind, and so no cussing and no yelling at people and doing things that are not good. You're not supposed to be doing that anyway, but it's emphasized during the month of Ramadan. And if you observe it in either way, you either fast, basically refrain from eating and drinking from sunrise to sunset, or instead you have to donate money to the needy, which would equal feeding one person per day. So one meal, you would provide one meal for one person. Instead of fasting, you can do that. So if you're unable to fast, then you're supposed to observe the month by donating basically a meal to the needy for every day of Ramadan. And Ramadan usually runs about 29 to 30 days based on the visibility of the moon, and when it's in its early crescent stages. So once people see it, basically, then the month begins, and then it goes full circle. And once they see it again, then that's the beginning of the new month, and then people celebrate what we call Eid, the end of Ramadan Eid, which is 3 day long, and you celebrate basically the end of Ramadan. And at that point, you can eat and and drink normal. You can resume your life as normal. And the same thing is, the Eid is a big social function. It's similar to Christmas. There is gift giving to the kids, or they give money in some cases. So it's a big social event in the Islamic world and in the Middle East. And people usually join in the celebration regardless of what their religion is, just kind of like people in the Middle East tend to celebrate Christmas with Christians. Christians celebrate Eid and Ramadan with the Muslims, and that's part of the coexistence in the Middle East that's been going on for, a couple of thousand years. Nothing new to the people there. Despite what you hear all the time, the fact is there is coexistence and cohabitation and understanding and tolerance more than what you hear about in the media. Otherwise, we wouldn't have diversity in the Middle East, diversity of ethnic and national backgrounds and religious backgrounds. So that's when it comes to Ramadan. Basically, that's what it is. It's a month you observe to kind of coach yourself to resist temptation and be good and kind to your neighbors and community by donating money to the needy and feeding the hungry and doing charitable activities. As far as Islam is basically a product of Judaism and Christianity. It's not a new religion. It's a continuation, kind of just like Judaism existed and monotheistic religions existed from the day of Abraham and on. And then Christianity came, kind of Islam came as basically the last chapter of these monotheistic religions, or progress in the monotheistic religion. So the Prophet Muhammad, who is also the descendant of Abraham, received that message and that obligation to spread the word of God, and that was the beginning of Islam. Islam recognizes Christianity and Judaism. Muslims believe in all the prophets that came before the Prophet Muhammad. They believe that Jesus came and he was the Messiah. So that's a big similarity with Christianity, and they also believe in laws and regulations, kind of like the Old Testaments have laws and regulations. Which brings me to the topic of Sharia, or Sharia law, like some people say. Sharia is law, so you don't have to say Sharia law, you just say Sharia. And Sharia is basically law. And what is Sharia? Because a lot of people I read all the time, or in the news, or I hear people protesting they don't want Sharia law in the United States or in Europe or in anywhere else. I just want you to know Sharia law does not supersede civil law. Sharia law is there to organize the lives of Muslims, basically, what they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. And I'm going to use a simple example about Sharia law and what the major components of Sharia law. It basically regulates inheritance, marriage, and, for example, adoption, right? So there is an agreement that happens between a man and a woman when they get married. And in that agreement, it specifies this is what happens before the marriage, during the marriage, and then, God forbid, there is a divorce, then there is an agreement on how to manage the divorce. So it's a contract between two people, right? So when two Muslims are going through divorce and they go to court in the U.S. and ask a judge to accept their contractual agreement, that's not enforcing Sharia law. That's an agreement that they have that they want to enforce in this country, because they got married outside of the United States in a different country, and then they moved to the US, and now something happened. They need to divorce, and that's what they're asking, the enforcement of the divorce agreement. Now, whether I agree with what the divorce agreement or the marriage agreement contains and how it's government, whether I agree or disagree, or you agree or disagree, that's really irrelevant to actually understanding what's going on and what it is, not people feeding you bogus information. What it is there is a contract between two people that occurred in another country, for example, or even in this country, if they agreed on, there is a marriage contract that also specifies what happens when you divorce. Then, they ask the judge to honor it. That has nothing to do with enforcing Sharia law in this country. It's kind of like when people in America get married and they have a prenuptial agreement, right? Now, you can say, oh no, here in this country everybody splits 50-50, this, that. Well, basically the courts will have to honor the prenuptial agreement, or if they don't honor it, then the judge has to have a reason for not honoring the prenuptial agreement, for example. So we're talking about a contractual issue and not a religious enforcement of something. And let's talk about adoption, for example. What Sharia says to Muslims is, and it encourages Muslims to be foster parents. But adoption in the American way, basically, of, let's say, me adopting a kid, and that kid carries my name and becomes just like my biological kids and can inherit, and all these things, that is not allowed in Islam. So what Muslims can do, and they are encouraged to be foster parents. We cannot disrupt the lineage of people. They have to belong to their families, and that has to be tracked so we don't have an accidental brother and sister basically marrying each other and having kids, like what happened in France a few years ago, where a brother and sister didn't know they were brother and sister, and basically had kids, and when they wanted to get married and found out that they were brother and sister, and of course in France they didn't allow that to happen, and I'm not really sure if they fought the fight and won the case or not, but that's exactly what Islam is trying to prevent from happening, is a brother and sister basically end up marrying each other. So, and it also regulates your relationships, who you are allowed to marry. For example, it says you cannot marry your sister, cannot marry your mother, you cannot marry your father's wife. There is a whole set of regulations on what people are allowed to do socially in their daily transactions. And that's what Sharia does. And inheritance in Islam, by the way, there is no writing a will and saying, I'm going to give one of my kids 50% and the other 5 kids 10% each. You only have the ability to control 10% of your wealth. You can decide how to manage that 10% after your death, but the rest of it will be divided against your children or brothers or sisters, or your family, your estate. Basically, it will be divided accordingly. So there is no you don't have the ability to prevent somebody from inheriting you. So that's what Sharia is. And these are kind of like contracts, and they deal mostly with family issues. So in the Middle East, majority of Islamic countries have civil laws, but the Sharia applies to family law. So when Muslims marry, divorce, they die, the inheritance, then these courts intervene if there is a dispute. The same with Christians. Christians go to Christian courts to handle their divorce or any disputes that they have when it comes to family matters. So Sharia law is not what people think. That Sharia is gonna make make all women cover this and that. That only exists in certain countries, and those countries. And in general, Islam does not require women to cover that way. It requires people, not just women, men and women, to be decent in their appearance. But there is no stipulation on covering, and there is no Islamic dress, right? Because Islam is a worldly religion, so you cannot be, Brazilian, for example, Muslim, and you are forced to dress like people in Saudi Arabia or in Yemen or in Malaysia, or there is no Islamic dress. I know Muslims tend to do stuff like that, but there is no Islamic dress. There is nothing in the Sharia that talks about a specific uniform for Muslims. So I just wanted to give everybody a quick idea about Islam and Sharia and Ramadan, and hopefully in a few days I'll make a video about some of the food that